Welcome back to the final episode of Overhaul Overland. It's been quite a journey, and now we head to Goch and Cooper, where we actually do the final stage of running this engine in. It's critical, and Deon and his team are going to explain exactly how it's done. So we're back here at Goch and Cooper. We've got Deon and Mark with us, the team here. Deon's going to share with us, what do you do before you start up an engine?
Okay, so this motor is basically just been fitted. It hasn't even been started yet. So for us from a tuning point, it's extremely important that we make all sure the fluid levels and leaks and all that stuff is right. So Mark's going to start it up just now. We're first going to obviously crank it to make sure there's sufficient oil pressure. And once that's all running, we'll have a look at a few other little factors around it, run it to operating temperature, and then shut it down, and then just do a proper inspection top to bottom to make sure there's no leaks and everything's fine. And then from there, Mark's going to be on the dyno. He'll apply load at various RPMs. And the reason for that is in the old days, people used to, you'll remember the old little 1600 Cortinas with a running in stick on the back of the windscreen. It says not faster than 60 kilometers an hour. That's like the worst thing you can do for an engine. As technology improves, people obviously understand engines and how they work and what needs to happen to them. The materials are all different. So by applying different loads, what that means is Mark's going to be running it. He's going to activate the brake at a light load, then he's going to leave the brake. So when there's load applying, there's more pressure inserted on the rings. That's going to actually force the ring to actually open up and work on the cylinder bore. And then when you're off the brake, that force actually relaxes. You decelerate, it creates a vacuum which pulls the oil up from the bottom of the engine to cool everything down. So you try to do that at altering it at different speeds. So Mark will use different speeds like 60, 80, 100, 120 through different RPMs, because you don't want the ring to form a memory. You want the ring to be able to understand it's got to work on different things. Once that's all running, it's not a long process, basically about an hour, Mark.
Yeah, around about, yes.
Around about an hour, then the engine's running. There's nothing more that needs to be done on it. From there, what we like to tell the customers is to head it out on the highway and alter your speed. So apply the normal road speed, 60, 80, 120. That will be a good memory. Basically to do the same thing that we were doing over here. And from experience, what we've seen is 20 times in one direction, 20 times in another direction is normally, that's basically done. So you'll accelerate from basically 80 and light throttle up to say about 110, 120 and tap off, and then on a deceleration. That's how we've been doing it for years, and it works absolutely like a bomb.
So you said 20 times that move, going through the range, the speed range, 60, 80, 120.
Yeah,
and then decelerate.
Basically like on a highway, you can just go from 80 light throttle to 120 and decelerate.
Right.
So you got that load, then you're off the load. You got the load and off the load. So and then the variations when you can stopping and driving that's very, very good.
So it's also important, Deon, you said that idling a car is never good at any time when you're trying to do this process, because the last thing you want to do is glaze a bore. People talk about glazing a bore. What is that now?
I hate idling on an engine, especially when it's cold. It's the worst possible thing that you can do, because there's enrichment systems programmed into the motor that supply extra fuel, and when there's extra fuel, it dilutes the oil, and that actually causes the glazing. So rather start your car up from ice cold and drive it slowly until it's at operating temperature, because the idling just accelerates the wear at a rapid pace. You don't want to do that. Definitely not.
And looking after the car from there, once we've done that process through backwards and forwards, then there's often a sequence where you look at some engines on, obviously you want to change the oil again because we've put a running in oil.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about why we put a running in oil?
Yeah, so basically on a new engine we prefer to use a straight, what they refer to as a monograde. It hasn't got a thinning factor and a thickening factor. It's basically like a straight. I don't think you get 40 anymore, and it's basically all 30s. No, you don't get 30s, you get 40s.
You get a 40, yeah. This has got a 40 in it. Yes.
Yeah, so that you'll keep in for basically a couple hundred kilometers, and then exchange it, because there might be a little bits of small little particles, all you want that out, and then you can switch to the preferred oil.
Right.
Yeah, it's just been a thing. Some people don't even put in a monograde in the running engine. It's just that it's what we were taught a while back, and we stick to what we know that works. We're not going to put in a full synthetic oil on a new engine. I mean, I think you've experienced that as well too. Put that in a new engine, you're not going to give the rings a proper chance to work.
Properly bed in and seat in. Yeah. Okay. And then maintaining it going forward. I mean, some of the engines you'll hear people talking about retorquing the cylinder heads, and there's a difference between some of the bolts on the engine. Some you do, some you don't. What would you recommend?
Yeah, well, basically there's two different types of bolt. You get a straight bolt that doesn't have a stretching method on it,
Yes.
and that would obviously require torquing. So after basically a few hundred kilometers, let it cool down, torque it, reset the tappets. If it's a stretch bolt, you don't need to retorque. It's also a little safety factor built in that you can make sure that everything is 100% sealing on the gasket side. And then I think the most important thing is oil changes. That is the most important thing on the engine, because a lot of people neglect that. Your car can leak oil and it can do X, Y, and Z, but it mustn't use a drop of water. If it's using water, there's something wrong. Then the system isn't pressurizing. And if the system is not pressurizing, it can lead to overheating and stuff. But oil, change it on the regular services. Very, very important, because oil's only got a certain lifespan. The quality of oil is also important too. There's cheaper stuff. There's obviously the more expensive stuff. Use a good quality oil and change it. On this vehicle, you'd probably want to look at every 10,000 kilometers. Some people do it religiously every 7,000 k's.
On an expedition truck, when it's a heavy laden truck, I recommend every 5 when people are on trips, really, because it gives you a chance to look over the truck and pick up problems. And of course, you're putting new oil in an oil filter. But when it's a normal engine like this, as you say, 7 to 10,000, oil's cheap in my books to change and look after the car. At the same time, you give a chance to look through the vehicle.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we get to witness it here on hand with clients' cars that actually miss, and I'm talking about the new modern vehicles that miss 1 or 2 services. Some vehicles miss 1 service, and you get in here, you take the sun plug off, nothing comes out.
Wow.
And then later on, it's like a, what's it consist of? Like a jelly.
Yeah, it's like a
hard jelly.
jelly.
Really?
It's unbelievable. That's how the newer modern cars. So oil changes are critical. This engine, being old school, will probably last a lot longer, but you don't want to even risk doing stuff like that. Because I mean, these things can run for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kilometers as long as they've got like nice, decent, fresh oil in it. Injectors, obviously, every 80,000 kilometers, have them tested. That's also a safety point, because what kills a diesel is the injectors when they basically worn and they spray in the wrong pattern and too much fuel. That just chases the exhaust gas temperature up. And once that happens, it creates a lot of problems. I know there was a range of these vehicles back in the day. They used to crack the cylinder heads. And that's obviously, the exhaust port's obviously designed slightly too small. But the rule of thumb is on a diesel, every 80,000 k's, make sure you have injectors tested. You don't have to literally pull them out. You can take them to somebody that's got a dyno, run it, and they can test the exhaust gas temperatures and the air fuel ratios. They can see, look, your vehicle's running excessively to reach. Let's start with checking X, Y, and Z. And that's all just to create longevity for the engine. I think the biggest question we get asked from 90% of the clients that want to actually do something to the vehicle to increase the performance, ask, is it reliable?
Yeah.
I mean, is it going to affect the engine anywhere? And is it going to make the vehicle heavy on fuel? That's like standard, getting asked that 4,500 times a day. And so what we can tell you with confidence and from experience over the years is, once this vehicle's optimized and the power is increased, it's not going to be heavy on fuel, because you've actually added more efficiency to the motor.
Yes,
The motor is actually working a little bit lighter as well too. Although it's got some more power, you're not going to use so much more throttle to negate going through thick sand. You're going to be slightly less off there. So it all adds to the efficiency, and it just improves the engine overall. And especially today's modern cars, they detuned quite severely because of emission controls, and a lot of people don't understand that. It's because we have VAT and taxes and all sorts of emission taxes to pay. So the more carbon footprint your vehicle puts down on Robben Island, the more they're gonna tax you on it. So the engineers are very clever in minimizing that footprint by actually detuning. It's a classic example. Your GD6 came out with 130 kilowatts, the first version. And the second version, which you got a facelift, 150 kilowatts. What's changed on it?
Yeah, no, sure.
And now those engines, we used to take the first ones to 160, 170.
Yes.
Now the second ones, the guys are doing to 200 kilowatts. It's just programming and changes that.
And then I think the other critical part is the responsibility of the person who owns the car to actually do those checks. You know, you've had a lot of work done on a vehicle. The critical thing is to do your daily checks. Look under the car for leaks. Look in the engine bay. Check the levels, at least for the first while, critically every day. When you're on an expedition, it's a daily routine that you do because you don't want to have any problems. But yeah, I think that's where the responsibility comes in.
Now, very important is to educate the consumer to use their senses, because like you just mentioned, now it's critical. If you park somewhere at a shopping mall, and before you get to the parking, have a look if the base clean. When you reverse out, if you see water, it's probably more than like your aircon, but if you see a different color, stop, smell it, and go and speak to somebody about it. You don't want to be riding on the road and then you've got no water in the vehicle. Things happen, pipes burst, water pumps fail. And the problem with most of today's vehicles is when there's no water in the system, your heat gauge doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's a critical thing. I know on these vehicles, years back, we used to fit a water sensor. It's like a little alarm, so you can be driving wherever you are, and if your water drops a millimeter or 2 millimeters below wherever you've set the setting, an alarm will go off to tell you, whoa, stop, there's a problem. Then you've saved everything in the engine and all that type of stuff. So it's just using your sensors to look for oil leaks, look for water leaks. It'll save you a lot of money.
And then how you drive it lastly, because I think that's also critical with diesels. You know, the rev range is not a petrol engine. It's a much more, you know, it's an engine which you don't want to rev it too far. Rev it with a good healthy range so it looks after the engine, you know.
Yeah.
It's not a high revving engine. These are nice, strong, slow workhorses. And if you respect how you drive the vehicle, it serves you, it looks after you.
Yeah. As the future's catching up within technology, they're doing crazy things with diesel engines now. I mean, the guys are going down to 3 cylinders now, making stupid 150 kilowatts. It's the pressures coming out of the injectors is 130, 140 bar pressures.
The new injectors is up to 2,000 bar.
Yeah.
On the common rail high pressure system, so it's crazy.
It's crazy stuff. The belts are running through the oil systems. Technology is absolutely changing drastically. The problem we got over here is the quality of a diesel.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem we got is the quality of the diesel.
And I think that said, there's a lot, we will be fitting an extra fuel filter
that'll be good.
to this. We do it on all the diesel trucks going into Africa. But again, you know, quality of diesel is one thing, how often you change your filters and your oil. So you've got to take the whole picture into balance to look after a vehicle, taking on the responsibility yourself for your checking and for servicing and maintaining it, and not just putting it onto the guy who built your car and your engine and saying, well, it's your responsibility, something went wrong.
And then obviously once you've done some mileage on, it's run in and everything's, we're happy with 100%, then we'll put it back on the dyno, and then Mark will obviously look at tuning it efficiently, you know, getting a little bit more power out of it and optimizing the fuel and all sorts of stuff. That's a completely another whole aspect, because then he's looking at parameters. You want to tell us a little bit about how you would go about getting the ultimate
When would you do that, Mark? Would it be after what sort of mileage would you want to see a car back?
Well, basically, in a case like this where it's a brand new motor, as soon as it's run in and it's got its oil change after the run in oil, I'd say it's good to go for a tune-up. I mean, if anything would go wrong, it could go wrong in your run-in time. So after that, I'm definitely happy to obviously optimize and do some tuning and up the power and see what we can get out of it. Obviously, in doing it in a safely manner.
Look, I think that's always critical. For me, it's about the reliability, especially in overland vehicles, and especially when you load them with a lot of equipment. And I know you work within those parameters. So, yeah, this is no exception, because this truck is going on to some big expeditions as a support vehicle that I'm using.
Yeah, Mark's got a lot of experience on the diesel side. He's actually worked very, very long specializing in diesel stuff. So he's got a lot of knowledge on that. Tuning side, I've been around tuners for many years, and he's extremely thorough in what he does on the dyno. So it's in good hands, the vehicle.
Yeah,
so
no, Mark's very thorough.
I'm hoping he's not going to find a little leak or something, because then he's going to chase us out of the room just now. Yeah.
Part of testing in this sort of closed environment gives you an opportunity to pick up little problems. So one of the things that Mark has picked up is the smell of the brakes. Now the back has got new handbrake shoes, which sits inside a drum, and obviously a new brake calipers that are overhauled, and a brake master cylinder. Because it's only heating up on one side, very likely it's just a handbrake shoe that's binding. But these are the sort of things you pick up. These are the little things that you've got to adjust, tweak, and make sure that before you test it on the open road, you have gone through the car a few times. So from here, we'll do the wheel alignment, and then it'll go back to Snyman's, and we'll do a full check over, making sure that, especially on the brakes, that nothing's binding. So, all good.
So, listen, I want to thank you and your team, because the whole process of sharing and learning is what we're about.
Yeah.
And I think putting something like this together is a big task. It's disruptive in any business to take on a film crew and work through all this. But I think the value in sharing your knowledge and your experience is what really counts. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So from here on, it's my responsibility to take this vehicle that's been completely rebuilt and make sure that I do the checks, looking for any problems that might crop up within that first 1,000 kilometers. Whereafter I'll change the oil to take out the running in oil, put in normal oil, and then move on with this truck to enjoy it. So this journey with the Overlander, we've really enjoyed. I've certainly enjoyed sharing my knowledge and experience with you. And in the future, we're going to take a look at the different vehicles, how we build them up inside, what equipment gets fitted to the vehicles, and how we build up the expedition trucks for our clients. So you can see how to build up your truck to suit your needs. So stay tuned, there's lots more to come. Like and subscribe, and for more information, look at our website.